Hi friends, it's one of your favorite garden teachers, Miss Rachel, and today we're going to make a rainbow stir fry. This is one of my favorite recipes, perhaps my favorite recipe in all the recipes we make from kindergarten through 5th grade. It is a 3rd grade recipe and we make it in March, so it's a perfect timing. So for our rainbow vegetable stir fry, you'll see that I didn't have all the ingredients that the recipe called for, so I edited it. Just like always, when we're at home, we're the chefs. We get to do what we want. So today what I did is I swapped out with veggies that I had, but I aimed to look for and ensure that I had a rainbow of veggies, right? This is called a rainbow vegetable stir fry. So we want to make sure that we have vegetables of all different colors in our stir fry today. So you'll see on my adaptation recipe, I tried to ensure that each of those colors were still accounted for. But again, no big deal if you have more of one color than another. Not a problem. So the first ingredient we're going to use is this. Can you recognize this? It's ginger. So ginger has a strong flavor. And so today when we're using it, we want to not only peel the skin off, but mince it. And remember, mince means to cut into small pieces. And that's because of the strong flavor, we don't want to get a giant bite of ginger, but ginger is really good for us. It's really great to help boost our immune system. So right now we're all worried about corona. This is a great thing to be eating a lot of. So when we use our ginger, a lot of times I see people using peelers to peel their ginger. A spoon is actually the easiest way. I'm just gonna hold it. And remember, when we use our kitchen tools, we always want to go away from our body. So I'm just going to very carefully peel off the skin of my ginger, okay? Then I'm going to mince. Remember, mince means cut up into really tiny pieces. So I'm going to cut my ginger up into tiny pieces. Our next ingredient is garlic, okay? So garlic also has a strong flavor. I love the taste of garlic. Not everyone does, but again, it's something that's really good for our immune system, so we're using it today. So for our garlic has a skin. Okay, my garlic's a little old, you can tell by how easily it's peeling off, but that's okay, I still want to use it. So what you want to do is you want to peel the skin off. Sometimes to make that happen, especially if it's fresh new garlic, you're going to want to chop off the ends on either side and then push with your knife. The garlic will then come out pretty easily and you'll have something that looks like this. Okay, again, there's a little bit of a dried end here. I'm going to cut that off. You'll also see that my garlic is a little old, so I'm going to cut that off. Then I'm going to mince. Do you remember what mince means? To cut up into really tiny pieces. Then I'm going to throw my garlic and my ginger into my pan with some sesame oil to cook. So my next ingredient that I want to add into my pan with my garlic and ginger is onion. So I had 2 options of onion. I had a red onion and a yellow onion. When I was looking at all the vegetables I was using, I wanted to keep in mind rainbow vegetable stir fry. So I wanted to come up with a color that either wasn't represented very much or wasn't represented at all. And I found that yellow onion was not very represented. Red onion, I had red cabbage, and then I also have purple cauliflower. So again, all kind of things that went in that family. I did have ginger and garlic, which I kind of considered part of this family, but we're using so little of it that I wanted to use yellow onion as well. So I have my yellow onion. The yellow onion has this peel on it. I want to take this peel off, take off some of the end, and ultimately cut it into pieces about this big, okay? So if we're looking at my finger, it's a little bigger than my first knuckle. Okay, and I wanted to add my onions into the sesame oil with my garlic and my ginger because they're aromatics. They're going to make everything smell and taste really nice. So I want to get those going first. I added all 3 of these ingredients into my pan with some sesame oil. Okay, our recipe calls for vegetable oil. Normally in cooking class, we always use olive oil, but olive oil has a little bit of a stronger taste than vegetable oil, so it calls for vegetable oil. However, in our sauce, we're going to be using sesame oil, so I just figured I'd cook my veggies in sesame oil too. So after I added all of those, I cut up my veggies. The first veggie I cut up and added is a carrot. I used 2 carrots and cut them up into discs. When we got towards the end, the fatter end where they're pretty big, I cut them in half and then continued to cut. I added my carrots. Why do you think I added my carrots as the first vegetable? Let's think of what carrots feel like when they're raw. They're pretty hard, right? When we eat them in a stir fry, we don't want them to be hard. We want them to be soft. So I added the carrots. Next, I have Brussels sprouts. If you watched my compost video, you know that my Brussels sprouts are a little old. So I had to peel off some of the outer leaves, but now they're fine. I cut off this end part where it connects to the plant, and then I cut each of my Brussels sprouts into 8 pieces. Up to you how you do that, but I would recommend about 8 pieces. I put them in my pot. Next, and I was very excited when I got this vegetable from the store because it's the first time that I've tried it in this color. Do you recognize it? It's cauliflower, purple cauliflower. So then I cut up my purple cauliflower and added it. The last ingredient that I used is a little confusing because it's called red vegetable, but I think it looks more purple. Can you recognize this? It's purple cabbage, or as the recipe calls for, red cabbage. So I cut all these up, put them in my pot, or my pan with some sesame oil, and I cooked them up. While that was happening, I also boiled some water, and the recipe calls for soba noodles. I don't have soba noodles, but I do have ramen noodles. So I cooked a thing of ramen noodles to mix with my vegetables. Okay, so while all of that is cooking, I'm gonna make my sauce. So as you see on the bottom, there are 6 ingredients for our sauce. I tried to stick with them pretty well, but it's up to you again. So the first thing that we need for this are measuring spoons. Where I'm staying, there aren't measuring spoons, but the good thing is they have spoons that are 2 different sizes, okay? So if we look, this one's a lot smaller, and this one's a lot bigger. This is like our biggest measuring spoon. Does anyone remember what our biggest measuring spoon is called? It's a tablespoon, okay? And our second largest measuring spoon, does anyone remember what this one is called? Teaspoon, okay? And I like to remember it is because a table is bigger than a teacup, okay? So again, we'll see my tablespoon right here is bigger than my teaspoon. So I'm going to start with soy sauce, okay? So I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. That's what the recipe calls for. But actually, I find that I would like my stir fry to be more saucy than what the recipe says. So I'm actually going to use 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. If you have a gluten allergy or you're gluten intolerant, tamari is the perfect substitute. It's actually traditional soy sauce, and so that's a great thing. So 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. My next ingredient is rice vinegar. We use this ingredient a lot when we're making Asian food, and it calls for 1 tablespoon. So I'll also, remember, I'm doubling, so I'll do 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. The next ingredient is sesame oil. So remember, I'm cooking my vegetables in sesame oil. Again, it calls for vegetable oil, but I'm using sesame oil since we're already using it in this recipe. And it calls for 1 teaspoon, but we're doubling, so 2 teaspoons of sesame oil. I usually add a little bit more than what it calls for, just to add some more oiliness to it. So 2 teaspoons, plus maybe a little bit of a half of a teaspoon of sesame oil. My next ingredient is peanut butter. Okay, so remember at school we don't use anything made out of nuts. So at school we'll either use wow butter, mantequilla de wow, as Maestra Ruiz calls it, or sun butter, which is made out of sunflower seeds. Mantequilla de wow or wow butter is made out of soy. So again, it's pretty good for people who have allergens with nuts. So it says 1 tablespoon of peanut butter. I have crunchy peanut butter at home. Normally at school we use a creamy version, so I'm interested to see how this tastes, but it says 1 tablespoon, so remember again we're doubling, so I'm doing 2 tablespoons of peanut. My next ingredient is honey, okay? And this honey is really special because it is made where the LA Galaxy plays. So it used to be called StubHub Center, now it's called Dignity Health Sports Park, and they are a really great partner to us. That's why Mr. Abraham, the soccer player, was able to come to Jackson. They give us this honey every year to use in our cooking class that they make right there at their stadium. So it calls for a teaspoon of honey, but again, we're doubling, so 2 teaspoons of honey. Also, a really great thing about local honey, so honey that's made near us, is that a lot of us have seasonal allergies. I have really bad seasonal allergies. They're coming in. I can feel the pollen in the air. I'm getting a little sniffly, a little cough, maybe a little scratchy in my throat. And local honey is really helpful for that. If you take a teaspoon of local honey and you eat that every day, that'll get rid of your seasonal allergies. And that's because our bees, who are pollinators, are going around and collecting pollen and nectar from our different flowers and then using it to make honey. Mostly bees use nectar to make honey, but remember we talked about this in 4th grade. Bees actually bring back some pollen to their hive for their baby bees to eat. So this is a really good way to deal with seasonal allergies. Next, our last ingredient is sriracha. So in cooking class, we do always try to add a little bit of sriracha, but it's up to you and your tastes. I like really spicy things, so I'm probably going to add a teaspoon of sriracha instead of an 1/8 of a teaspoon that they call for. So again, I like to just use a little bit more, but up to you. If you don't like spicy things, we'll take this out. But if you like spicy things, add a little more. Remember with sriracha, you can always add more, but you can't take some away. So I would always start with less, and then as you taste and you're eating, you can always add more. My sauce, I've added all those things together, and this is my sauce. Okay, so I've made my sauce and I'm going to pour it over my veggies and noodle in my pan. But remember, I don't want to pour all of it at once, and I also want to make sure it's really mixed up because our honey and our peanut butter are a little thicker while our other ingredients are thinner, and I want to make sure it's all nice. So I used a fork to just mix it all up. If you have a whisk, you could also use a whisk. So I mixed all up my sauce, made sure it was all kind of the same consistency, and poured it over my noodles and my veggies. Then I gave it a good mix, and here you go. So thanks for cooking with me. I'm really excited for you all to try making rainbow vegetable stir fry. Remember, you're the chef. It's okay if you don't have all of these ingredients. We can mix it up. So remember, read your books, do your jumping jacks, be a brave taster, and eat your veggies. Thanks all. Thanks for cooking with me.